Welcome to the third module, third session. This PPT has been prepared by referring many sources and it is not being used for financial gains, and it's exclusively used for education purpose only. In this session, we will discuss about interest and interest factors, time value of money, nominal and effective interest rates, compound and simple interest, the difference between simple and compound interest, a few examples to explain the concepts. First, let us understand what interest is. Interest is the cost of using capital. We borrow money from a financial institution, say bank, and when we borrow money from them, we need to pay them the rent for that. The way in which we stay in a house and pay rent for the owner, in the same way the financial institution own that money, and when we borrow that money, obviously we have to pay rent for that, and that rent is termed as interest. The majority of engineering economy studies involve commitment of capital for extended period of time, so that the effect of time must be considered. Normally what happens, the loan that we take, that we borrow, is not for a shorter duration of say 1 or 2 days. Normally it's an extended time of say 5 years, 10 years. Even if we uh, purchase a car, purchase a vehicle, normally it will be of 7 years, 5 years, 7 years. If we purchase a house, it will be normally for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. So when that is the case, the effect of time must be considered, because time has a considerable effect on the amount of the interest that we pay. Let us discuss about the origin of interest. Is it new one? Did it start about a decade or a century back? Let us see that. One of the studies has indicated that it existed in Babylon in 2000 BC. Okay, even before that, Chanakya during Chandragupta Maurya's time has very clearly said in his Arthashastra about uh, the interest and the taxes. He always has said that interest must be collected from the borrower of a money without giving him any pain. Taxes must be collected from a businessman the way in which honeybee collects the nectar from each and every flower. Flower will not feel the pinch, but honeybee will get the nectar. The same way, businessman or the borrower should not feel the pinch, but government or the financial institution should get their interest. That is how we should collect the interest. History also shows that the idea of interest became established in the form of international bankers existed even in 575 BC with home offices in Babylon. Egyptian, Rome, they all followed this concept of interest. Interest is nothing but the rent to be paid for the money borrowed. That's what we just discussed now. We have borrowed the money for which we have to pay the rent. How much rent should be paid? Few houses we will pay higher rent, for few houses we will pay lower rent depending on the luxury of the house. Similarly, depending on the financial institution, depending on the urgency, the lender will charge the rate. So that rent we have to pay. Period may be a week or monthly, quarterly or biannual or yearly. That means the interest may be calculated every week, every month, every quarter, every 6 months, or once in a year, depending on the system that the financial institution follows. What are the different types of interest? Predominantly, there are two types. First one is simple interest, second one is compound interest. Under compound interest, we have nominal interest rate and effective interest rate. The Third type under compound interest rate is discounting compounding. Nominal interest rate and effective interest rate, they come under discrete compounding. The third category is continuous compounding, in which the interest is calculated on a continuous basis, not every day or every quarter or every 6 months or every year. It's done on a continuous basis. That is termed as continuous compounding. Now let us just see this picture. The first picture is on 1995. The second picture is with respect to 2005. The third picture is with respect to 2015. When you see these three pictures, what flashes to your mind? Immediately that flashes to your mind is that in 1995, if I take 100 rupees, I used to get this much of commodity. In 2005, if I take this same 100 rupees, I get this much of commodity. In 2015, if I take the same 100 rupees, I can buy only this much of commodity. What is happening? The amount of commodity that I am purchasing is reducing from decade to decade or from time to time. And when I ask a question to any of the student or any common man, they immediately say that the value of money is reducing. Does any currency lose its value? That is the question. And normally economists will say no. Value will not be lost. Value will remain same. In 1995 also you are getting goods worth 100 rupees. In 2005 also you are getting the goods worth 100 rupees. In 2015 also you are getting the goods worth 2015. In 2025 also you will get the goods worth 100 rupees only. But the problem is that the total quantity of goods that you are getting is reducing. That indicates the purchasing power of the money is reducing. Purchasing power of money reduces with every country. It doesn't happen just with rupees. That happens with every country. For example, the minimum denomination in Venezuela is something around 1 million uh, uh, 1 million units. That means that is the minimum currency level that they have. So does that say that 1 million currency has no value there? It has value corresponding to that particular amount. Okay, the purchasing power is so poor that even if you give 1 million units of currency of Venezuela, you can get only very few items. Whereas 1 million in rupees in India is very much. $1 million is very, very huge. That is the purchasing power of the currency. That is the meaning of this purchasing power. Don't say that value is reducing. We can only say that purchasing power is reducing. Yes, now we discuss about the purchasing power of money. The previous diagram very clearly indicated the purchasing power of money is reducing from time to time. It is the value of a currency expressed in terms of amount of goods or services that one unit of money can buy. So that changes from time to time. Normally it reduces from time to time. Why does it reduce? Many reasons. Many reasons: the economic strength of the country, the inflation rate, the exports and imports, all these factors will have an impact on the purchasing power of money. Purchasing power is important because all else being equal, inflation decreases the amount of goods or services you will be able to purchase. You will be able to purchase. Inflation rate is a very important concept in economy of a country. Inflation is a part of macroeconomics. Inflation is not a part of microeconomics. It doesn't affect to a greater extent to individual income or a small business income. whereas it affects to a greater extent when it comes to a nation's economy. What is that inflation rate? Inflation rate, I always compare inflation rate to that of blood pressure or BP. What is that blood pressure? If the blood pressure is high, then also it's very riskier for human beings. If the blood pressure is very low, then also it is riskier. Blood pressure should be at an optimum level. Similarly, inflation rate should also be at an optimum level. If the inflation rate is very high, say if it exceeds say 13%, 14%, it is an indication that uh, the country is under dire situation of economy. The country is for sale. It's a simple indication that the country is for sale. Similarly, when inflation rate comes to negative, what we term it as deflation, that means the case of Venezuela. The minimum denomination will be in millions of that currency. So it has no value at all. Even if you spend 1 billion units, you can get only small amount of quantity of goods. That means the value of the purchasing power of money is so bad that it has moved to deflation stage. Neither of these two things should happen, and inflation should always be at a normal state of say 4 to 6%. That is the most optimum level for a healthy economy. That doesn't say that the inflation, if it is high, it is bad for the economy. If it is low, it is good for the economy. No, it should be neither too low nor too high. That's why I always compare inflation to blood pressure. Just like blood pressure should be at an optimum level, inflation rate should also be at an optimum level. Now let us discuss about the next concept of time value of money. As the time passes by, just we observe that the purchasing power of money goes on changing. Normally it reduces because of the inflation, because of the increase in the population. The expenditure that the country need to spend on its citizens goes on increasing. Population is increasing day by day. India has its own problem, China has its own problem, New Zealand, Germany, they have their own problem. But population has made an impact on the economy of the country. The time value of money is the idea that money that is available at the present time is worth more than the same amount in the future due to its potential earning capacity. What does that mean? Present times money is worth more than the same amount in future. 100 rupees what I get today, what does it purchase today, will not purchase the same thing after say 5 years, after 10 years. That is time value of money. This core principle of finance holds that provided money can earn interest, any amount of money is worth more the sooner it is received. See, what happens is that the money earns interest. Either because of the inflation rate, the worth of present value of money is more than the future worth. In other way of time value of money is that if I bury an amount without investing it, the value of money will not change. 100 rupees will remain 100 rupees. If I want to retain its earning power, what I have to do is that I have to invest it. If and only if the money earns interest, then only the purchasing power of present money can match up with future money. If money is buried, then it loses its earning power. If money is invested and starts earning interest, its purchasing power will remain the same. In other words, a money invested today, if it earns 10%, after 1 year it becomes 110. Now the purchasing power of 100 rupees might have come down to but the worth of the money is now 110 rupees, which means it can still purchase the same amount what it had purchased 1 year ago. That is time value of money. Let us continue our discussion. This is depicted in the form of a picture. See, this is number of periods. If I plot time in x-axis and value in y-axis, as the time increases, value increases. Value is increasing because of interest I. Okay, even though the purchasing power is decreasing, as I is increasing, I can hope that the purchasing power of that money remains the same even after some time. That is the concept of time value of money. Let us throw some light on simple interest. As the name itself suggests, it is simple. Why it is simple? It is simple to calculate. Simple to calculate in the sense here the interest is calculated on the principal, original principal, and principal will remains the same throughout the study period. It will not change. That is why it is called as simple interest. And the interest that it earns during the preceding interest period is not considered for calculation of interest. One example here is that of the education loan. If you borrow an education loan for a period of say 4 years, till 4 year plus 2 year after your graduation, the interest calculated will be simple. Only after that compound interest will take place. It is given by I is equal to P into N into I. During your high school you would have studied it as P into N into R. Notations are different, but the concept remains the same. Where accumulated amount F is given by principal plus interest. F is given by P plus I. That is, P is the principal and capital I is the total interest earned during the study period N, and small I is the rate of interest. Now let us discuss compound interest. Here the interest is calculated on principal plus the interest amount accrued during the previous interest periods. For example, if the investment is made for say 2 years, an investment of 1000 rupees at an interest rate of 10%, during first year it earns 100 rupees. So for the first year interest is calculated on original principal, that is 1000 rupees, but for the second year interest is calculated not on just 1000 rupees which was being done in simple interest, but in compound interest, interest is calculated on 1000 plus 100, that is 1100. As a result, what will happen? The interest earned during second year is not just 100 rupees, it is 110 rupees. That's why the interest goes on increasing as the time period increases. That is the beauty of compound interest. Compound interest takes into account the effect of time value of money on both principal as well as accrued interest. That's what we just discussed. Let us discuss both simple interest as well as compound interest by taking an example. And will it make a significant difference? That also we will see. Why bankers are more interested with compound interest rate? Why borrowers are more interested with the simple interest rate? Let us try to understand. Will it make any significant difference? Let us take an example of a person taking a loan of 10,000 rupees from a bank for a period of 5 years, and he has to repay that loan at the end of 5 years using the following cases. First, a simple interest rate of 8% per annum or per year, considering compound interest rate of 8% per annum or per year. Let us understand the solution. First, let us consider a simple interest at the rate of 8% per year. How is it calculated? So PIN, capital I is equal to PIN. So P is equal to, this is P, this is interest rate. So N is equal to 1 year. So 10,000 into 0.08 into 1, that becomes 800 rupees. Okay. So now each year the calculated interest is 800 rupees. The interest will not change from year to year because principal of 10,000 is same. Let us put that in the form of a table. First year it earns 800 rupees and the total amount accrued is 10,800. In the second year also it earns 800 only. Why? Because interest is calculated on 10,000 and not on 10,800, and hence interest remains the same for all 5 years and goes on adding to the previous amount. So 10,800 plus 800 is equal to this much, this plus this is equal to this much, and finally I need to pay 14,000 rupees for the bank. If I take a loan of 10,000 rupees, after 5 years the total amount that I owe to the bank or that I need to pay to the bank is 14,000 rupees. Let us discuss the case of compound interest at the same rate of 8%. In my previous sessions also I have always said in management we have to compare cat with cat and rat with rat. Don't compare cat and rat and say that cat is stronger than rat. For simple interest I have used 8% per annum. For compound interest also I have to use 8% per annum only. I cannot charge more here and say that compound interest is more. That's wrong. Okay. Here let me calculate the interest it accumulated at the end of 2 years. Okay, first year same thing, PIN 10,000 into 0.08, that is equal to 800 rupees. During the second year interest is calculated on not 10,000 but on 10,800. This is your new P multiplied by small I, that is equal to N is equal to 1 because it's only for 1 year. So the total amount that it earns during second year is 864. In case of simple interest it was 800. Now in case of compound interest it is 64 rupees more than simple interest. Let us see that in the form of a table. In first year same thing, 800. So now interest is for the second year is calculated not on 800 but on 10,800. That's why it earns 864, 64 rupees more. Now third year in simple interest it was 800. In this case it is 933. Same procedure. In third year the principal will be 11,664 multiplied by 0.08, that amounts to 933. Then added it becomes 12,597. For the fourth year it is 12,597 multiplied by 0.08, that becomes 1,007, amounts to 13,604. That multiplied by 0.08, 1,088, and totally 14,693. How much we are paying extra? We are paying 693.28 rupees extra. If it were simple interest, it was just 14,000. If it is compound interest, it is 693.28 extra. So that's why whenever I borrow loan from the bank, I have to make sure that whether it is simple interest or compound interest. It is always compound interest. Okay, only for education purpose to support students for up to 2 years after graduation, it is simple interest. Later it becomes compounding. This is put it in the form of a bar chart. We can understand that in the first year it is same, there is no difference. Second year this much difference, third year this much difference, fourth year this much difference, at the end this much difference. So this is what we need to understand. If I put it in the term of a line graph, see, this is the amount of extra amount that I have to pay for in case of compound interest. We need to be very careful. Now, within compound interest rate, there are two classes, nominal interest rate and effective interest rate. Continuous compounding is there, which we are not discussing as it is not in your syllabus. But nominal and effective interest rate you need to understand very carefully, because financial institutions may fool you if you do not know the difference between nominal and effective interest rate. Let us understand what are they. It takes two form. The nominal interest rate does not take into account the compounding period, whereas effective interest rate takes into account the compounding period. What is that compounding period? Let us see. Effective interest rate takes into account the compounding period. What is that compounding period? Whether the interest is being calculated once in a year, then it is annual compounding. Twice a year, that is once in 6 months, that is semi-annual compounding. 4 times a year, that is every 3 months, that is quarterly compounding. 12 times a year, that is once in a month, that is monthly compounding. Or the fifth type is daily compounding, wherein the interest is calculated every day. Nominal interest rate, by default it is annual compounding, that is interest is calculated every year. Whereas in case of effective interest rate, it could be annual. If it is annual, effective interest rate is as same as that of nominal interest rate. If it is semi-annual compounding, interest is calculated twice. If it is quarterly compounding, interest is calculated 4 times. If it is monthly compounding, interest is calculated 12 times. If it is daily compounding, interest is calculated 365 times. Let us understand that. The relationship between nominal interest and effective annual interest rate is given by IE, that is equal to 1 plus R divided by M whole raised to M, whole thing subtracted subtracts 1. Okay, what are these things? Notations where IE is the effective interest rate, R is the nominal annual interest rate. Instead of R, you can also use the notation small I. Normally every textbook, every economist use the notation R, and hence I have also used the notation R. In other words, you can also use the notation small I divided by M, which is the number of compounding period. For example, if it is semi-annual compounding, M will be 2. If it is quarterly compounding, M will be 4. If it is monthly compounding, M will be 12. Okay, so if you substitute M with 1, that is annual compounding, then IE will be as same as that of nominal interest rate. There won't be any difference. IE will be different to that of nominal interest rate if and only if M is other than 1, could be 2 or could be 4 or could be 12, depending on whether it is semi-annual or quarterly compounding or it is monthly compounding. Let us understand the annual compounding or the compounding period in a little bit detailed manner, and I suggest you remember this table very clearly. This is very important, and students tend to commit mistake without making the corrections in the formula. If you do not make the corrections in the formula, then you may lose marks, because annual compounding is different from that of semi-annual compounding. As the compounding period changes, the corresponding changes in the interest rate as well as the compounding period, that is the term, should also change. Let us understand that. Nominal interest rate of say 12%. Effective interest rate is 12%. N is equal to 1 and I is equal to 12% when it is yearly compounding. There is no difference between effective interest rate and nominal interest rate. When it comes to semi-annual compounding, okay, nominal interest rate is not at all applicable. It becomes effective interest rate now. As soon as we shift from annual compounding with any of these things, semi-annual or quarterly or monthly or daily, our interest moves towards effective interest rate. Nominal interest rate or not at all, interest is not at all applicable. Now, what will happen to effective interest rate? What will happen to this? If it is semi-annual compounding, I will become I by 2 and N will become 2N. When I becomes I by 2, it is 12 by 2 and hence it is 6%. If it is quarterly compounding, I will become I by 4 and N will become 4N. For N in the sense what? It is substituted in terms of years, N into 1 year, because it is for 1 year. So 4 into 1, 4. There are 4 compounding periods to be considered for calculation. Similarly, monthly compounding, I will become I by 12. That is 12 by 12, 1%. N will become 12N. N will become 12N and hence the total number of compounding period is 12. If N is 2 years, then it is 12 into 2, then it would be 24. So I have to calculate the interest for 24 compounding periods, and it will keep on changing like that. If it is for 3 years, 12 into 3, 36. It goes on changing like that. It is not that N is equal to 1 always. N is the value that I substitute in terms of years. If the problem has the study period for 5 years, N will be 5 years. If the study period is for 1 year, N will be 1 year. Daily compounding, again it is N will be N into 365 and I will be I by 365 and I becomes 0.032 per day. It is 1 per month. It is 3 per quarter. It is 6 per semi-annum. It is 12 per annum. That's how it keeps on changing. So it is not 0.032 per year. Now it has changed. It has changed from annum to daily. So it is 0.032 per day. Similarly, when it is monthly compounding, it is 1% per month. Similarly, when it is quarterly compounding, it is 3% per month. If it is semi-annual compounding, it is 6% per semi-annum or 6 months, like that. If it is 12 years per annum, 12% per annum, it remains 12% per annum. Let us take an example. A credit card company charges a 21% interest per year. That is the nominal interest rate. What effective annual interest rate does the company charge when the interest is compounded annually, compounded semi-annually, quarterly, monthly and daily? Let us calculate under each heading and see what difference does it make. Will it make any significant difference? Let us try to understand. First, let us take the case of compounded annually. R is equal to 0.21 per year or I. Both are one and the same. M is equal to 1 year. Here I have considered M as 1 year. Okay. So I is equal to m plus r divided by m whole rise to m minus 1. That is the formula. We substitute the values in the formula and we get it as 1 plus 0.21 whole rise to 1 minus 1, and when I simplify it, it is 1.21 minus 1 and it is 21%. As I already said, it doesn't make any difference between a nominal interest rate and effective interest rate when it is compounded annually. Here we proved that I will remain 21%, which is nothing but nominal interest rate. Now let us take the example of compounded semi-annually. R will remain as it is, M will remain 1 year only, but here compounding periods are 2 because we are calculating the interest twice a year, every 6 months. That is why M will become 2. When I substitute that in the formula, 1 plus R by M whole rise to M minus 1, M is 2 years, M is equal to 2. When I substitute the values, 1 plus 0.105 whole rise to 2 minus 1, and when I simplify, I get the answer as 0.221 or 22.1%. You see the difference now. From 21% I moved to 22.1%, that is 1.1% higher. How did I change R? No. Did I change the principal? No. Only thing is that I have just changed the number of compounding periods from 1 to 2. Instead of calculating the interest once in a year, I am calculating the interest twice a year. That made all the difference, and it changed from 21% to 22.1%, 1.1% higher. Let us see what happens when quarterly compounding is done. Same thing here, the difference is M will become 4 per year as the interest is calculated 4 times a year, every 3 months. I substitute the values, same formulas, same substitution, and I get the answer as 22.71. See, 22.1 to 22.71, 0.61% improvement over semi-annual compounding and 1.71% improvement over annual compounding. This is how it is changing now. Let us see the case of compounded monthly now, how it changes. Same or M will be different now because it is compounded monthly. M will become 12 per year. Okay. When I substitute the values, I get it as 23.1%. See, 22.712, I changed it to 23.1, almost 0.4% higher compared to yearly compounding, 2.1% higher. Had we thought about these things? Now let us see the case of daily compounding. R is equal to same thing, 0.21, but what will happen to M? M will become 365 per year. And when I substitute the values to that formula, I is equal to 1 plus R by M whole rise to M minus 1, I get I as 23.4. How significant it is. Effective and nominal interest rate allow banks to use the number that looks most advantageous to the consumer. See, now banks will say, I am charging you 21% interest. You did not ask what is the compounding period. They will not reveal the compounding period. By the time you go back and try to clear the loan, and when you see the interest rate, you will be shocked. You are expecting 21%, But if it is daily compounding, it is 23.4%. That is 2.4% higher. It is not a small amount. 2.4% is a very huge amount for a big loan. If it is 100 rupees, it doesn't make any much difference. But for a huge loan of say 1 million, 2 million, 2.4% makes very significant difference. That's why, my dear friends, whenever you borrow a loan, make sure of asking the financial institution or the manager of that financial institution what is the compounding period, how often the interest is calculated. Is it annual compounding or semi-annual compounding or quarterly compounding or monthly or daily? And I have shown you very clearly how much difference it will make when I move from annual compounding to daily compounding. It makes a difference of 2.4%, and it's a very huge difference, and don't neglect this. Now we will discuss about another important concept of cash flow diagram. What is a cash flow diagram? It is a visual representation of income and expenses over a period of time. The horizontal line represents the timeline, and the vertical arrows represents the income and the expenditures. It starts with a simple horizontal line. Upward arrows represents the positive cash flow. That is, I take that amount. The amount comes to my account. Okay, that means I earn it. It is, the other names are revenue, income. These are the names of positive cash flow. Downward arrows are the negative cash flow. That means the amount gets debited from my account. I lose that money. I lend that money, and these are all these different terminologies used for negative cash flow. This is how it is represented. The horizontal line represents the time period from 1 year to n number of years. N could be in months or years, or it could be semi-annual, depending on the compounding period what I am using. And positive upward arrows represents the positive cash flow, downwards arrows represents the negative cash flow. This is the cash which I am losing, this is the cash what I am earning. So this is revenue, and this is the expenditure. Okay, this is normally termed as expenditure or negative. This is normally I use the terminology revenue or positive cash flow. We just now discussed a cash flow diagram. We could understand that it contains a horizontal line representing the timeline, the upward arrows representing the positive cash flow in the form of revenue or income, and downward arrows in the form of expenditure. Okay, see here in this diagram we can very clearly see that the first diagram is from a borrower's point of view. You are the borrower, you take a loan. Of course, loan is an obligation that you need to pay, but in the beginning that amount comes to your account, it is credited to your account. As a result, it becomes a positive flow. Of course you have to pay that loan. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Don't get confused. Sir, I am borrowing the money, how can it be positive flow? That's why I always relate this to credited or debited. Now when you borrow money, that amount gets credited to your account, that comes to your account. That is why it is considered as positive flow, and hence it comes to top. Whereas that loan must be cleared now. Whenever you start clearing in say first year or second year or third year, fourth year, like that, that amount goes on debited from your account. When it starts when it gets debited from your account, that becomes a negative flow. That's why it is on the bottom side of that horizontal line. Let us see the same case from lender's point of view. This is the cash flow diagram for the same case. They are one and the same. These two cases are one and the same. Here, this amount what was credited to your account gets debited from lender's account. Maybe a bank, or maybe an individual, or maybe a financial organization, whatever it is. This person or the organization will lose this 1000 rupees, and hence it is termed as negative to him in the initial stage at t is equal to 0. This is today. That's what you term it as t is equal to 0. Okay. Today you will lose that money as a lender, but starting from next year you will start earning that money. This money gets credited to your account. From where? From this borrower. Borrower loses this amount and gets into your account. In the initial stage, lender loses this amount and gets into borrower's account. That's why the initial amount what the borrower gets is positive, and the later what he pays the loan is negative. Whereas for a lender, the initial amount is the lost money, but later he starts gaining that, and that's why it is termed as positive. So this is the difference between lender and the borrower point of view. So I hope it is clear to you the different viewpoints, borrower and lender. Same case can be written either in the terms of borrower or in the terms of lender, but don't mix them up. That is very, very important. What I suggest you here is that either you write cash flow diagram either as borrower or as lender. Don't mix them up. That is very, very important. Thank you.